She took the house, the car, and half my savings, and just when I thought the nightmare was over, she served me with court papers demanding child support. But the truth, hidden for years, was about to shatter everything she thought she controlled. Hey everyone. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And as this story unfolds, drop your predictions in the comments, because trust me, what's coming will leave you stunned. My name is Jay, and if someone had told me 5 years ago that my life would fall apart because of love, I would have laughed. But I'm not laughing now. It all started the day I found the divorce papers on the kitchen counter. No warning, no conversation, just her signature and mine left blank. I stood in our now empty kitchen, surrounded by silence and the echo of betrayal. Lisa, my wife of 8 years, had vanished from my life overnight, taking our daughter Emma and leaving behind nothing but a legal ambush. We hadn't been perfect. There were arguments, distance. I worked long hours to support us, and she always claimed I was emotionally unavailable. Maybe I was. But I never cheated. Never laid a hand on her. Never gave up on us. But she gave up on me. And in the divorce? She took it all. The house I grew up in, the one my father left me, my car? Sold to cover her attorney fees. I watched my bank account drain to nearly zero, all while she smiled from the other side of the courtroom like it was just business. Cold. Calculated. I thought that was the end. I thought she'd move on, find someone else, and I'd finally start picking up the pieces. I got a small apartment, picked up extra shifts at work, and did my best to keep going, to be ready for every other weekend when I was allowed to see Emma. But then it stopped. The visits, the calls, everything. She ghosted me, blocked my number, moved to a new place without telling me, and suddenly, I was a father in name only. For almost a year, I had no contact with my daughter. Every attempt to reach out was met with silence or legal threats. And just when I thought I'd reached my lowest point, I got served. A thick envelope. Summons to court. Lisa was demanding full custody and backdated child support. Tens of thousands of dollars. She claimed I hadn't provided sufficiently and that Emma was suffering because of it. I couldn't believe it. Not only had she taken my daughter away from me, now she was trying to bury me in debt, to paint me as a deadbeat father in front of a judge. I had followed every court order, sent every check I could, and now she wanted more. At first, I was furious. But then, something didn't sit right. I started thinking back, small things that hadn't made sense at the time. The way Lisa had always hesitated when people said Emma looked like me. The offhand comments she'd made about starting over before she even filed for divorce. The strange distance she kept during her pregnancy. That's when a seed of doubt was planted. One I never thought I'd entertain. But the deeper I looked, the more the memories twisted into something darker. Was Emma actually mine? The thought nearly destroyed me. I loved that little girl with everything I had. I raised her, changed her diapers, sang her to sleep when she was sick. I would have died for her. But as the court date drew closer, my gut told me I had to know. So I did something I never imagined I would. I requested a paternity test. My lawyer warned me it would be a risk. The judge might see it as a stall tactic or worse, an act of desperation. But I needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Lisa, of course, was livid. She played the victim, claiming I was trying to humiliate her, that I was just looking for excuses not to pay. She painted a perfect picture of a struggling single mother, and the courtroom ate it up. But the judge approved the test. And so we waited. Days felt like weeks. Weeks like months. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. My hands trembled every time I imagined what that envelope might contain. And then it arrived. A sealed manila envelope with a return address from the lab. Cold. Clinical. Lifeless. Inside it was one page. One sentence that would change my life forever. But I won't spoil it just yet. Because before I show you what the test revealed, I want to take you back to the day Lisa first told me she was pregnant. To the decisions I made out of love. To the sacrifices I thought were worth it, and the lies I never saw coming. Everything, the whole truth, starts there. So stick with me because this story is far from over. And trust me, when the DNA results come in, everything you think you know is going to flip upside down. Let's rewind. It was a Saturday morning. I remember the sunlight pouring through the windows of our old house, before it was taken from me. Lisa was acting strange, fluttery, almost nervous. She kept pacing around the kitchen, fiddling with the coffee pot, glancing at her phone like she was waiting for something. And then she said it. "I'm pregnant." I froze. Not because I wasn't happy, we had been talking about starting a family for over a year, but because something in her tone didn't match the moment. It wasn't joy, it was fear. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She just handed me a positive test like it was a business document. But I didn't question it. I smiled, pulled her close, and told her we were going to be okay. I meant it. Whatever was causing her anxiety, I figured we'd work through it. Looking back, maybe I should have asked more questions. As the pregnancy progressed, things got stranger. Lisa started keeping her phone on silent. She'd take long drives alone, claiming she needed space. I offered to go with her to every doctor's appointment, but she always had an excuse. I already went. They rescheduled last minute. It was just a quick checkup, no big deal. I wanted to trust her. I chose to trust her. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? But the distance between us grew, and I couldn't ignore it. She became more irritable, more withdrawn. Anytime I brought up baby names or planning for the future, she'd shut me down. And then one night, I found something. Her laptop was open on the dining table. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just went to close it so the battery wouldn't die. But a message popped up on the screen, mid-conversation, from a name I didn't recognize. It read, "I still can't believe you went through with it. Are you sure he thinks it's his?" My heart stopped. She walked in before I could read more, slammed the laptop shut, and said it was just a joke between friends. That I was being paranoid. That I didn't trust her. And then came the tears. The anger. The manipulation. So I let it go. I told myself it was nothing. That I was overthinking. That I was just scared about becoming a father. The day Emma was born, everything else disappeared. The moment I held her in my arms, none of those doubts mattered. She was beautiful. Tiny. Perfect. She had Lisa's eyes and what I thought was my smile. I cried that day, not out of fear, but because I believed I had a family. A real one. And for the first few years, things were okay. Not great, but stable. Lisa stayed home with Emma, and I worked overtime to keep us afloat. I missed milestones, birthdays, and bedtime stories, but I did it for them. Or so I thought. Because behind every sacrifice, every sleepless night, was a secret I couldn't see. Around the time Emma turned 5, Lisa started pulling away again. She said I didn't connect with her emotionally, that I wasn't present enough. I tried. I begged her to go to counseling, to work things out. But it was too late. She had already made her choice. And then came the divorce. Swift. Brutal. Like a hit and run. I was left picking up the pieces of a life I thought we built together. And now, here we were, years later, facing off in court. Me barely keeping it together. Her dressed like the perfect mother, accusing me of neglect, abandonment, and financial irresponsibility. But that one moment in the past, the message on her laptop, stayed in my head like an echo. I knew, deep down, there was more to the story. That's why I ordered the DNA test. Not because I wanted to disown Emma. Never. But because I needed the truth. I couldn't keep living in a lie. And now, as I stood outside the courthouse, envelope in hand, heart pounding, I was about to find out if everything I had given had been for a child that was never mine to begin with. I couldn't open it yet. I sat in my car for an hour, staring at the seal, imagining every possible outcome. Was I a fool? A father? A victim? All three? And just as I reached for the flap to tear it open, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from someone I hadn't heard from in years. A name I never expected to come back into my life. And what he said, it changed everything. The voicemail came from a guy named Nate. We weren't friends. Not really. Just acquaintances. He and Lisa dated briefly before she and I got together, something she always brushed off as a stupid college fling. Said it was over before it began. I never thought much of him after that. Until now. Nate's voice on the recording was shaky, like he didn't even want to be making the call. But the words that followed shattered the little stability I had left. Hey man, I don't even know if this is still your number, but I needed to tell you something. I should have said something years ago, but I didn't have the guts. I just found out Lisa's dragging you through court for child support, and I think there's a chance Emma's mine. I stopped breathing. He kept talking, his voice cracking under the weight of whatever guilt he'd been carrying. She and we hooked up a few times after you guys got married. I didn't know she was still with you. She told me you were separated. I believed her. But when she told me she was pregnant a couple months later, she said it wasn't mine, that it was definitely yours. I let it go. But now, seeing the dates, hearing what she's doing to you, I had to say something. I replayed that message at least 10 times. Each word was like a dagger to the chest. The timeline matched. The lies aligned. And worst of all, I realized I had built my entire life around a child who might have been conceived during my marriage, but not within it. Suddenly, the DNA results burning a hole in the envelope on my passenger seat weren't just paperwork. They were the key to everything. The final answer. The truth I both craved and feared. But I couldn't open it yet. Not without one last memory clawing its way back to the surface. A few years ago, Emma had come home from preschool with a drawing, stick figures, smiling faces, a house, and above them all, me, mommy, and daddy. Only the daddy didn't look like me. It was silly. A child's doodle. But she drew blonde hair. Green eyes. Nate had blonde hair. Green eyes. I have neither. At the time I left, told her she had an active imagination. But now, sitting in that parking lot, it didn't feel so funny. It felt like a clue I'd ignored. A truth she didn't even know she was telling. I finally worked up the courage to call Nate back. He answered after the second ring. His voice was hesitant, almost embarrassed. But he confirmed everything. The dates. The messages. The late-night visits. He even remembered the exact weekend Lisa told him she was pregnant, and how quickly she cut him off after that. She ghosted him just like she did to me. And that's when it clicked. Lisa had always been in control. Calculating. Every step of her plan had been precise. Leave the marriage, secure the assets, gain full custody, demand support, all under the image of being a scorned, single mother. But now her house of cards was starting to crumble. Because if Emma wasn't mine, she wasn't just fighting me in court, she was committing fraud. Financial, legal, emotional. I looked at the DNA envelope one last time, my hands trembling, heart racing. This was it. I opened it. One page. Black text. Cold and final. Probability of paternity, 0%. I wasn't her biological father. I read that line over and over, and every time it hit like a freight train. 8 years of birthdays, bedtime stories, band-aids, ballet recitals, and none of it had been real. At least, not to Lisa. To me, it had been everything. I dropped the paper, stared out at the courthouse, and knew 2 things. 1, I had been lied to on a level I couldn't begin to describe. And 2, Lisa had no idea what was coming next. The morning of the hearing, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. Not fear. Not even anger. Just a cold, hollow ache that came from realizing everything I believed in for almost a decade had been a lie. I wasn't walking into court as a father anymore. I was walking in as a man who'd been betrayed. But this time, I had proof. When I entered the courtroom, Lisa was already seated with her lawyer. She looked composed, calm, smug even, like she already knew the outcome. She didn't even glance in my direction. Just sat there, flipping through documents like she was prepping for a guaranteed win. And I could see why. She had painted me as the villain in her narrative. A deadbeat dad who had abandoned his daughter. She had spreadsheets, screenshots, even old text messages taken out of context. Her lawyer was armed with emotional statements designed to make me look like a heartless man trying to evade responsibility. But I had one document. Just one. And it was about to change everything. The judge entered. The case was called. Lisa's lawyer stood up first, speaking with the confidence of someone who thought they'd already won. He outlined Lisa's struggles as a single mother, detailed the financial strain, the alleged missed payments, the emotional toll. He talked about Emma's best interest and how I had neglected my role as a parent. Lisa even teared up at one point, wiped her eyes, put on the performance of a lifetime. And I sat there in silence, watching it all, letting them dig the hole deeper. Then the judge turned to me. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything to present to the court? I stood, reached into my briefcase, pulled out the envelope. The DNA results. I do, Your Honor. I'd like to submit evidence that directly challenges the basis of this claim. I handed it over. The judge took a moment to read it. His eyebrows lifted, slowly. Then he looked at Lisa. Ms. Peterson, were you aware that Mr. Peterson is not the biological father of the child in question? The room went completely silent. Lisa froze. For a moment, her expression slipped. The calm, the composure, all of it cracked. She stammered, fumbled, then finally muttered something about not being sure, and that it didn't matter because he raised her. But it did matter. Because legally, everything hinged on paternity. The judge asked for clarification. When did Lisa learn that I might not be the father? Had she ever disclosed this possibility? Was there anyone else who could be the biological parent? She couldn't answer, and the more she tried, the worse it got. Her lies tangled into each other like threads in a web starting to collapse. My lawyer then stepped in. Calmly, professionally, but with precision. He explained that I had been misled into signing the birth certificate, that I had provided support under the assumption of biological paternity, that I had been denied visitation and kept out of Emma's life without cause, and that my ex-wife had knowingly withheld critical information. The courtroom shifted. The energy changed. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the victim. And Lisa? She was exposed. The judge ordered a temporary suspension of all support claims pending further review. He also scheduled a custody evaluation to determine whether I had any parental rights based on my emotional bond with Emma, something called equitable parenthood. But legally? Financially? Lisa's case just collapsed. Her lawyer looked stunned. Probably because he didn't know the full story either. Lisa sat in silence, face pale, staring straight ahead like the walls around her had just caved in. And me? I walked out of that courtroom not victorious, but vindicated. I had spent years doubting myself, questioning whether I was doing enough, whether I was failing as a father, a husband, a man. And in one moment, the truth finally set me free. But here's the thing. As much as I wanted to move on, one thought haunted me more than any courtroom judgment ever could. What about Emma? She had no idea. No part in this. She was just a little girl caught in the middle of her mother's lies. And the question I couldn't escape was this. Did I still have the right to be her father? After court, I sat in my car staring at the dashboard, unsure of where to go or what to do. I had won the legal battle. Technically, Lisa's case was falling apart, and the judge had put everything on hold. But somehow, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt empty. Because in all this chaos, no one had asked the most important question. What about Emma? 8 years. That's how long I'd been in her life. From diapers to kindergarten, tea parties to bedtime stories. I had kissed her forehead when she had the flu, helped her learn to ride a bike, watched her fall asleep with her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. And now, I wasn't sure if I'd ever get to see her again. I wasn't on her birth certificate anymore. I had no legal rights. Lisa could shut the door and never open it again, and I'd have no say. I tried calling. No answer. Tried texting. Nothing. I even drove past the old house one night, just to see the light in Emma's bedroom window. Just to remind myself she was real. That it hadn't all been a dream. But I didn't knock. Because how do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father, the only one she's ever known, isn't really her dad? How do you tell her that everything she believed about her family is a lie? And more importantly, should I be the one to tell her? Weeks passed. Then one day I got a letter. A court notice. Lisa was now petitioning for retroactive support, claiming I owed her back pay for the time I wasn't contributing financially. Even after the DNA test. Even after the judge had paused the current case. It was like she was doubling down. Fighting not because it made sense, but because she couldn't stand the idea of losing control. But this time, I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for Emma. I asked my attorney about a legal concept I'd learned from a friend, psychological parenthood. It's rare, but in some states, if a non-biological parent has formed a significant emotional bond with a child and acted in a parental role, the court can recognize that person's rights. We filed a petition. I wrote a statement. Not legal jargon. Just a letter from my heart. I told the judge what Emma meant to me. I included photos, drawings she made, birthday cards I'd saved over the years. I wasn't trying to win points. I just wanted someone to see that love isn't measured in DNA. The hearing was scheduled. Lisa fought it, of course. Said I was just trying to avoid payments. Said I was manipulating the system. Said Emma barely remembered me. But none of that was true. Because something happened before the court date that I'll never forget. Emma sent me a letter. In crayon. It came in a pink envelope, addressed to Daddy. Inside was a drawing. Stick figures again. Her in the middle. Me on one side. A heart between us. And in the corner, tiny words scrawled in crooked handwriting. I miss you. I don't care about the rules. You're still my dad. I broke down. Right there at the kitchen table, I let myself cry in a way I hadn't in years. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. She knew. She remembered. She chose me. No court order could erase that. When we stood before the judge a week later, I brought that letter with me. Not as evidence. Just as strength. Lisa argued. Her lawyer objected. But this time, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. And the judge? He listened. Carefully. Quietly. Then he did something no one expected. He granted me visitation. Not custody. Not full rights. But enough. Enough to see Emma again. To rebuild. To be part of her life, even if just in pieces. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I had before. But it was something. And in that moment, something became everything. The visitation order came through on a Thursday. I was allowed one supervised visit a week for the first month. After that, pending a court-appointed counselor's evaluation, we could move to unsupervised time. It wasn't much. But to me, it was everything. The first visit was scheduled for Saturday morning at a family counseling center halfway between my apartment and Lisa's new house. I barely slept the night before. I kept pacing the living room, imagining how she'd look, what she'd say, whether she'd remember me the way I remembered her. What if she was scared of me now? What if Lisa had poisoned her against me? What if she didn't want me anymore? The fear nearly made me cancel. But I didn't. I showed up early. Sat in the waiting room like a man about to meet a ghost. Then I heard the door open. Tiny footsteps. A voice. And then, there she was. 8 years old, but somehow older. Her hair was longer, her eyes more guarded. She hesitated when she saw me, like she was trying to make sure it was real. And then she ran. Straight into my arms. No hesitation. No confusion. Just that familiar little girl I used to tuck in every night, wrapping her arms around my neck and whispering, "I missed you so much, Daddy." I broke. Right there, in front of the counselor, the supervisor, the sterile white walls and clipboards, I cried. And I didn't care who saw. Because I had her back. And she had me. We sat in a playroom filled with coloring books and puzzles, and for a moment, it was like time rewound. She asked about my apartment, my dog, the stuffed animal she left behind when Lisa moved out. She told me about school, her favorite teacher, how she hated math now but still loved drawing. She even brought me something. A friendship bracelet. It was made of yarn and way too big, but she said she made it during art class, just in case she saw me again. And that's when I realized she'd never stopped believing I'd come back. Even when Lisa cut me off. Even when the lies started. Even when I disappeared from her world, she never let go. Neither did I. Over the next few weeks, our visits became a lifeline. We played board games, did homework, painted little ceramic animals. Every visit ended the same, with her clinging to me a little longer, whispering, "I wish I could come home." It gutted me, because her home wasn't mine anymore. Lisa still had custody, still controlled the narrative. And as much as I hated it, I knew pushing too hard could risk everything I'd gained. But then, one day, Emma dropped a truth bomb that shook me all over again. We were coloring side by side, and she said, almost casually, "Mom says Nate's gonna be my new dad." My stomach dropped. The man Lisa cheated with. The actual biological father. I asked her what she meant, carefully, trying not to scare her. She shrugged. "He comes over sometimes. Brings pizza. He's nice, but I don't want a new dad." She looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes and said, "You're my dad, even if Mom says you're not." I wanted to take her and run, but I couldn't. All I could do was hold her hand and promise her that I wasn't going anywhere again. That night, I called my lawyer. Because if Lisa was planning to replace me, I had to act. And this time, I wasn't just fighting to see her. I was fighting to bring her home. Would you fight for custody if the child wasn't biologically yours, but loved you like a real parent? Or would you walk away to avoid more pain? Let's talk about it in the comments. After Emma told me Lisa was planning to let Nate, the biological father, be her new dad, something inside me snapped. Not out of jealousy, but out of a deep, burning need to protect the little girl who still called me Daddy, even after everything she'd been told. I knew Lisa didn't love Nate. He was convenient. A loophole. A way to legally replace me and shut me out for good. And if I didn't act fast, she'd get away with it. So we filed a motion. Full custody. Based on de facto parenthood. Emotional harm. Stability. Consistency. I had years of photos. School records with my name. Pediatrician visits. Teacher letters. Even a statement from the court-appointed counselor, who wrote that removing me from Emma's life could cause significant emotional distress. Still, my lawyer warned me, this would be a long shot. Courts prefer biological ties. And Lisa, like always, played her part well. She sobbed. Claimed I was confusing Emma. Said I was jealous of Nate. Painted herself as the wounded mother just trying to do what's best. But for once, I wasn't alone in that courtroom. Emma had a guardian ad litem assigned to represent her interests. And after interviewing us both, that woman stood up, cleared her throat, and said 5 words that stopped the room cold. "Emma wants to live with Jay." Lisa went pale. The judge asked for clarification. The guardian nodded. She was clear. She said Jay makes her feel safe. That he listens. That he never left, even when he could have. Lisa tried to argue. Said I had manipulated Emma. Said a child couldn't know what's best. But that wasn't the point. Because sometimes children do know. The judge took a recess. We waited in silence. My hands were shaking. This was it. When he returned, his face was unreadable. But his words? I'll remember them forever. While biology is a factor, so is emotional permanence. This court recognizes Mr. Peterson as a psychological parent. Full custody is granted to Mr. Peterson, with supervised visitation for Ms. Peterson. This ruling is in the best interest of the child. I couldn't breathe. I had to hear it twice before it sank in. I'd won. Not out of revenge. Not for money. But for Emma. Because I loved her. Because I never stopped. Lisa stormed out. Her lawyer followed. And for once, she didn't get the last word. Emma moved in a week later. Her room was waiting. Her stuffed animals were right where she left them. That first night, she curled up in bed, held my hand and whispered, "I knew you'd come get me." And I lost it. Because in a world full of broken promises and DNA tests and courtrooms and lies, a child's belief was the only thing that never wavered. It's been 2 years now. Emma's thriving. We still go to therapy together. And when people ask, I don't say stepdad or former guardian. I just say dad. Because that's who I am. And who I'll always be. What did this story mean to you? Would you fight through betrayal and heartbreak to keep the child you love? Drop your thoughts and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more drama.